The first attack hit Daesung's forces like a ghost. A supply tunnel in the eastern sector, one that carried life force energy to 3 of his forward camps, collapsed without warning. The Qin soldiers stationed there never saw the enemy. They heard the stone groaning above them, and then the ceiling came down in a roar of black rock and dust. By the time the survivors dug themselves out, the passage was sealed, and the life force stream beneath it was buried under 100 tons of rubble. Daesung lost 600 soldiers and a major supply line in a single night, and he had no one to fight back against. The second attack came 2 days later. A Qin commander loyal to Daesung received a message from one of his scouts, warning that Yuna's forces were massing in the northern tunnels for a direct assault. The commander pulled 3,000 soldiers north to meet the attack. They marched through narrow passages for hours, silver eyes scanning the darkness, life force burning bright and ready. They found nothing. The northern tunnels were empty. The message had been false. And while 3,000 of Daesung's best soldiers were marching in the wrong direction, a small strike team of 200 Qin, trained by Taeho in human ambush tactics, hit Daesung's southern camps. They moved through the tunnels like shadows, striking fast and pulling back before the enemy could respond. They collapsed more passages. They poisoned supply points. They left traps that triggered hours later, when no one was expecting them. By the time the 3,000 soldiers returned south, the damage was done. Daesung lost 1,200 more soldiers and 2 more supply lines. He was furious. The Great Lord had never faced an enemy like this. Every war he had ever fought had been a contest of strength. The stronger side pushed forward. The weaker side broke. That was how the Qin had always fought. And Daesung was the strongest Qin alive. His life force burned like a cold star, fed by the thousands he had drained. No one could match him in direct combat. No one could stand before his power. But Taeho was not giving him a direct fight. He was cutting Daesung apart piece by piece, from the shadows, using tricks and lies and strategies that the Great Lord had never seen before. Human strategies. Strategies born from a species that had spent its entire existence being weaker than everything around it, and surviving anyway. The war went on for 3 weeks. Every day, Taeho's tactics bit deeper. Collapsed tunnels, false messages, ambushes in the dark, redirected life force streams. Daesung's army, which had once outnumbered Yuna's 3-to-1, was bleeding out. Soldiers began deserting, slipping away in the night, returning to their villages, or hiding in abandoned tunnels. The fear that had once kept them loyal to Daesung was replaced by a new fear. The fear of fighting an enemy they could not see, could not predict, could not understand. An enemy that thought like a human. But Daesung was not stupid. He was ancient, and cruel, and brilliant, and he learned. After 3 weeks of losing, he changed his strategy. He stopped spreading his forces out. He pulled his remaining army, still nearly 7,000 strong, into a single massive formation, and began marching directly toward Yuna's capital. No supply lines to cut, no flanks to ambush, just a wall of the strongest Qin on the planet, moving together, draining everything in their path. It was the move Taeho had been expecting and dreading. He stood with Yuna in the war room, looking at the map. The blue lights flickered as the ground trembled slightly. Daesung's army was 3 days away. We cannot stop a force that size in open combat. She was standing across the table, her silver eyes grim. Over the past weeks, the fierce Qin lady had become one of Taeho's strongest supporters. She had seen his tactics work. She believed in them now. But even she could see the wall they were heading toward. No, Taeho agreed. We cannot. Not with soldiers alone. He looked at Yuna. She looked back. And in that look, they both understood what had to happen. The life force streams, Taeho said. The deep ones. The ones beneath the capital. You told me once that they are the oldest and most powerful on the planet. that even you have never touched them, because the energy is too raw, too dangerous. They would destroy anyone who tried to channel them, Yuna said. Even me. Would they destroy Daesung's army? Silence filled the room. Every kin commander stared at Taeho, then at Yuna. If I opened the deep streams, Yuna said slowly, the energy would flood upward through every tunnel in the eastern sector. Everything in its path would be consumed. Daesung's army, his soldiers, all of it. But the surge would not stop there. It would keep spreading. It would tear through half the planet's tunnel system. Thousands of our own people live in those tunnels. Then we move them, Taeho said. We have 3 days. We evacuate every village, every camp, every living soul from the eastern and southern tunnels. We pull everyone back to the capital. Then we open the streams and let the flood do what our army cannot. And what about Daesung himself? Jiwon asked. He is powerful enough to survive the surge. It will weaken him, but it will not kill him. I know, Taeho said. That is why I will be waiting for him on the other side. Every commander spoke at once. Ha-Yun slammed her hand on the table. Ji-won shook his head. A human facing Daesung alone? It was suicide. It was madness. But Yuna raised her hand, and the room went silent. She looked at Taeho with those deep red eyes. He could see the war inside her. The queen who needed to protect her people, fighting against the woman who could not bear to lose him. You will die, she said. Maybe, Taeho said. But if I do not go, everyone dies. Daesung will survive the surge and come for you. Your army will be exhausted from the evacuation, and he will still be the strongest kin on this world. He paused, unless someone is there to finish what the flood starts. Someone he does not expect. Someone he does not understand. You are one human with one gun. I am a human who has survived everything the galaxy has thrown at him. And I have one advantage that Daesung will never understand. What? Taeho looked at her. Something worth dying for. The evacuation took 2.5 days. Taeho's plan worked. Runners spread through the tunnels, and the kin moved with their natural speed and silence. Thousands of civilians poured into the capital, filling every hall, every chamber, every corridor. It was crowded and chaotic and terrifying, but they were alive. On the morning of the 3rd day, Taeho stood at the entrance to the eastern tunnels. Behind him, the massive stone gates of the capital were sealed. Ahead of him, miles of empty black tunnels stretched into the dark. Somewhere out there, Daesung's army was coming. Yuna stood beside him. She did not want to let him go. He could see it in every line of her body, in the way her hands were clenched, in the way her red eyes burned. Come back to me, she said. I will, he replied. It was cold and warm at the same time. It tasted like forever and goodbye and something in between. Then he walked into the dark. 2 hours later, Yuna opened the deep streams. The planet screamed. A wave of raw life force, blue and blinding and ancient beyond measure, erupted from the depths of Noctara and tore through the eastern tunnels like a river of light. Daesung's army, 7,000 strong, was caught in the flood. Soldiers screamed as the energy consumed them, not draining them, but overwhelming them, filling them with so much life force that their bodies could not contain it. They burst like stars. The tunnels shook, the walls cracked, the flood roared on, and when it finally stopped, there was nothing left but silence and the smell of burned stone. Daesung survived. As Taeho had predicted, the Great Lord was strong enough to endure the surge, but he was not unharmed. His power was shattered to a fraction of what it had been. His armor was cracked. His silver eyes were dim. He stumbled through the ruined tunnels, rage and pain twisting his face into something barely recognizable. And there, at the end of a collapsed passage, standing in the fading blue glow of the dying surge, was Taeho. One human, one energy pistol, half-charged, one combat knife. Daesung laughed. It was a broken, ugly sound. A human, he said. They sent a human to kill me. No one sent me, Taeho said. I chose to be here. The fight was short and brutal. Daesung was weakened but still faster and stronger than any human. He moved like lightning, slashing with hands that could drain life force with a touch. Taeho could not match his speed. He could not match his strength. But he could think. He had studied Daesung's fighting patterns for weeks. He knew how the Kin Lord moved, how he attacked, where he left openings. And, in the narrow confines of the collapsed tunnel, Daesung's speed meant less. The Great Lord could not circle him, could not flank him, could only come at him from the front. Taeho fired 3 shots. 2 missed. The third hit Daesung in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. In that moment of imbalance, Taeho moved forward, faster than he had ever moved in his life, and drove his combat knife into the crack in Daesung's armor, into the flesh beneath. Daesung howled. He grabbed Taeho by the throat, and Taeho felt the draining begin, his life force being pulled from his body like heat from an open wound. His vision darkened, his heart stuttered. But he did not let go of the knife. He twisted it deeper. And Daesung, weakened by the surge, drained of most of his stolen power, felt the blade find something vital. His grip loosened. His silver eyes went wide. He looked at this human, this small, fragile, impossible human, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the Great Lord felt fear. He fell. Taeho fell with him, gasping, his life force nearly gone. The tunnel was silent. The blue light faded. Darkness closed in around him. He thought of Yuna. He thought of her red eyes, and her cold hands, and the way she looked when she smiled. That rare, real, beautiful smile that no one else had ever seen. Then the darkness took him. He woke up in the throne room. Blue light everywhere. Faces above him. Kin faces. Haeyeon, Jiwon, others. And Yuna, kneeling beside him, her hands on his chest, pouring her own life force into him, pulling him back from the edge. Her red eyes were full of tears, and she was whispering his name over and over. Taeho, Taeho, Taeho. He blinked. He lived. Later, when the celebrations had died down and the kingdom was beginning to heal, Yuna stood before her people, with Taeho beside her. The great hall was full. Every kin on Noctara had come. They looked at the human who had saved their world, this small, scarred, impossible man who had done what no kin could. "He will stand beside me," Yuna announced. Her voice filled the hall like thunder, not as a pet, not as an advisor, as an equal, as my chosen. The hall was silent. Then Haeyeon, the fiercest commander of them all, knelt. Jiwon knelt after her. One by one, every kin in the hall knelt, not to Yuna, but to Taeho. A human, standing in the heart of the vampire kingdom, unbroken. Later that night, they stood together on the surface of Noctara. The sky was dark, as always, but the stars were out, millions of them, bright and sharp against the black. It was the first time Taeho had seen stars since he crashed. "The galaxy will hear about this," Yuna said. "A human and a vampire queen. They will not understand." Taeho looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the human federation was still fighting its wars. Somewhere out there, other species were still afraid of the dark and the things that lived in it. But here, on this world without sunlight, a human had found something worth more than sunlight. Something worth more than safety or comfort or the warmth of a familiar sky. He had found her. "Let them wonder," he said. "Let them talk. Let every species in every corner of this galaxy ask how a human ended up standing beside the vampire queen." He took her cold hand in his warm one. "And when they ask me why I chose this, why I chose you, I will tell them the truth." He looked at her. Stars burned above them, ancient and endless. Because she asked me if I was sure. And I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Yuna smiled. That rare, real, beautiful smile. And in the dark, under a sky full of stars, on a world where no human had ever survived, a man and a queen stood together, hand in hand. And the universe watched, and wondered, and was afraid. Because humanity had done the impossible again. Not with armies, not with weapons, not with power. With a choice. And that was the most human thing of all. The War Council met in a deep chamber beneath the throne room. It was a cold, round room with a stone table in the center, and maps of Noctara's tunnel systems carved into the walls. Around the table stood Yuna's remaining loyal commanders, 8 kin lords and ladies, each one leading what was left of their house's soldiers. Together, they had roughly 4,000 fighters. Daesung had over 12,000 and growing. The commanders did not trust Taeho. He could see it in every pair of silver eyes that followed him when he entered the room. A human, standing among kin warriors, speaking about strategy as if he belonged there. Several of them had argued against his presence. One, a fierce kin lady named Ha-Yeon, had told Yuna directly that allowing a human to advise in a kin war was an insult to their ancestors. Yuna had silenced them with a single look. Taeho stood at the table and studied the maps. He had spent 3 days learning the tunnel systems, memorizing every passage, every junction, every narrow point. The kin fought the way they had always fought. Direct confrontation, waves of soldiers pressing forward with their life force draining abilities, overwhelming the enemy with raw power. Daesung was better at this style of fighting because his forces were stronger. If Yuna's army met his in open battle, they would lose. Simple as that. So we do not meet him in open battle, Taeho said. The commanders stared at him like he had suggested they fly to the sun. Then how do we fight? Asked a kin lord named Ji-won, a scarred veteran who had served Yuna for 600 years. The same way humans fought when we were outnumbered, Taeho said. We make the battlefield work for us instead of against us. Your tunnel system is perfect for this. Narrow passages, choke points, dead ends. If Daesung sends 12,000 soldiers through these tunnels, they cannot all fight at once. They have to move in columns, and columns can be cut. He began to explain. He talked about ambush tactics, about collapsing tunnels to split enemy forces, about hit-and-run attacks that would bleed Daesung's army slowly without ever giving him a real battle. He talked about disinformation, sending false messages to make Daesung think attacks were coming from the wrong direction. He talked about targeting supply lines, because even kin needed the life force streams to stay strong. And if those streams could be redirected or blocked, Daesung's advantage would shrink. The kin commanders listened, at first with doubt, then with growing interest, and finally with something close to belief. These were strategies they had never considered. The kin had always fought with honor and directness. The idea of deception as a weapon was foreign to them. But Taeho laid it out so clearly, so simply, that even Ha-Yeon, who had opposed him loudest, began to nod. This is not how warriors fight, she said when he finished. No, Taeho agreed. This is how survivors fight. And right now, survival is all that matters. The preparations took 2 weeks. Taeho worked harder than he had ever worked in his life. He trained kin soldiers in human guerrilla tactics. He taught them how to set traps in the tunnels using their own abilities, collapsing stone with focused bursts of life force, creating illusions in the dark passages to confuse enemies, sealing exits to force Daesung's troops into kill zones. The kin were fast learners. Their natural speed and stealth made them perfect for ambush warfare. They just had never thought to use their abilities that way before. He and Yuna spent long nights together, planning. They sat side by side at the stone table, Maps spread before them, marking positions and routes and fallback points. Taeho noticed how she changed during those nights. The cold mask she wore in public began to soften when they were alone. She asked questions about human history, about how small armies defeated big ones, how colonies survived against empires, how people kept fighting when all hope was gone. Humans never stop fighting, Taeho told her one night. Even when we should, even when it makes no sense. We fight because giving up feels worse than dying. Yuna was silent for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "I think I understand that feeling." There were moments between them now, small ones. A look that lasted too long, a hand that brushed against another hand over a map, and did not pull away. A silence that was not empty but full, like a room filled with unspoken words. Taeho felt it. He knew she felt it too, but neither of them spoke about it. There was a war to fight first. The night before the battle, Taeho stood alone in the corridor outside the war room. The plan was set. The soldiers were ready. Everything was in place. In 12 hours, they would begin the first wave of attacks on Daesung's forward positions. If the plan worked, they could cripple his supply lines within days and force him into a fight on their terms. If it failed, they would all die. He heard her before he saw her. Not footsteps. Yuna never made sound when she walked. But he felt her presence, that deep hum of ancient power that he had grown so familiar with. She appeared beside him like a shadow given form. They stood together in silence for a long time. "Taeho," Yuna said. He turned to her. In the blue light, her face was calm and beautiful and sad. Her red eyes were soft in a way he had never seen before. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "You know why. I want to hear you say it." Taeho took a breath. He looked at her, really looked at her. Not at the vampire queen, not at the ruler of Noctara, at the woman underneath all of that. The woman who had lived for 3,000 years and watched everyone she ever cared about turn to dust. The woman who ruled a dying kingdom on a world without sunlight. The woman who had shown him a door in her walls that no one else had ever seen. "Because of you," he said. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet. Vampires could cry, Taeho realized. They just rarely did. "Are you sure you desire me, human?" she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word, and in that crack, Taeho heard everything. The loneliness, the fear, the disbelief. She was not asking if he found her attractive. She was asking if he could truly want someone like her. A creature of darkness, a being that fed on the living. A queen with blood on her hands that would never wash clean. She was asking him if she was worth choosing. "I have seen the worst things in this galaxy," Taeho said. "I have fought in wars that killed millions. I have watched friends die in my arms. I have been broken and rebuilt so many times, I do not even know which pieces are original anymore." He reached out and took her hand. It was cold. It was always cold. But he held it like it was the most precious thing he had ever touched. "You are not a monster, Yuna. You are a queen who has been carrying her people for 3,000 years without anyone ever carrying her. And I am telling you right now, you do not have to carry this alone anymore." Yuna's hand tightened around his. Her grip was strong enough to break bones, but she held him gently, so gently, as if he were made of glass. "I am eternal," she said, "and you are human. Your life is a candle next to my fire. If I let myself care for you, I will watch you grow old. I will watch you die. And I will spend the rest of my existence remembering you. Then I will make sure those memories are worth keeping," Taeho said. Something broke inside Yuna then, not in a bad way, in the way ice breaks when spring comes, a great slow cracking that lets something warm flood through, for the first time in centuries. She stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his. Her skin was cold against his warmth. Her breath was cool against his cheek. They stood like that for a long time. 2 soldiers in a war they might not survive. 2 broken hearts beating against each other in the dark. Tomorrow, the fighting would begin. Tomorrow, there would be blood and death and fire. But tonight, in a corridor deep beneath the surface of a world without sun, a human and a vampire queen stood together, and the universe held its breath. Because something had changed, something that could not be undone. And when the morning came, they would face the storm together. Taeho had been on Noctara for 23 days when the first village died. Yuna told him about it in their usual room, but this time she was not sitting still. She was standing by the far wall, her back to him, her long black hair falling like a curtain. Her hands were pressed flat against the stone, and Taeho could see the tension in her shoulders. For the first time since he had met her, the vampire queen looked shaken. "A village in the eastern tunnels," she said. Her voice was tight, controlled, like a rope pulled too thin. 300 kin, all of them drained. Every last drop of life force taken. The children, too. Taeho felt something cold move through his chest. He had seen massacres before. He had walked through the ruins of human colonies, burned by alien raiders. But 300 people, drained to nothing. That was not war. That was feeding. "Who did it?" he asked. Her red eyes were darker than usual, like blood drying on stone. "Daesung," she said. The name hit Taeho like a punch. Daesung, the tall lord who had threatened him at his cell door, the commander of Yuna's own military. He had not just been angry about a human in the queen's court. He had been planning something much bigger. Yuna told him everything. She had no reason to trust him. He was human, an outsider, a stranger from an enemy species. But loneliness does strange things to even the oldest hearts, and the queen had no one else to talk to. Her advisors were afraid of Daesung. Her guards were loyal to the crown, but Daesung controlled the army, and the other noble houses were watching, waiting to see which side would win before choosing their own. Daesung had been building power for centuries. He believed the kin were dying because they had become weak, because queens like Yuna had chosen mercy over strength. The old kin, he said, were hunters. They took what they needed without guilt. They fed on lesser species and grew powerful. Yuna's way, living quietly on Noctara, feeding only on the natural life force of the planet itself, was killing them slowly. So, Daesung had started feeding on his own people. Not directly. He was too smart for that. He had found a way to poison the life force streams that flowed beneath the planet's surface, the deep rivers of energy that the kin drew their strength from. When a village's stream was poisoned, the people weakened. And when they were weak enough, Daesung's followers moved in and drained them. All that stolen life force flowed to Daesung, making him stronger with every village that fell. "He is building an army of the strong by feeding on the weak," Yuna said. "And every day more of my people join him. Not because they believe in him, because they are afraid." "How many villages has he taken?" Taeho asked. 7 in the last year. The eastern tunnels are almost entirely his now. If he takes the southern tunnels, he will control half the planet. After that, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "He will come for you," Taeho said. "Yes. And your army?" "Smaller than his, and getting smaller every day. The soldiers who are still loyal to me are brave, but they are weakened by the poisoned streams. Daesung's forces are fed and strong." Yuna's jaw tightened. "I have fought wars that lasted centuries. I have crushed rebellions and survived betrayals. But this is different. He is not just fighting me. He is eating my kingdom alive from the inside." Taeho was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the table, thinking. His mind worked the way it always did, breaking the problem into pieces, turning each piece over, looking for the weak points. It was what had kept him alive through 4 wars and 2 years in a frozen prison camp. Not strength, not luck, just the ability to think clearly when everything was falling apart. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Yuna looked at him. There was something raw in her eyes, something she was not used to showing. Vulnerability. "Because you are the only one in this kingdom who doesn't want something from me," she said. "The nobles want power. The soldiers want orders. The advisors want safety. You want nothing. You are here because I kept you here. And yet you sit across from me and speak to me like I am just a person. Not a queen, not a monster, just a person." Taeho held her gaze. He understood what she was saying, even the parts she left unspoken. 3,000 years of being feared and obeyed had built walls around her, just as thick as the ones he had built around himself. And now those walls were crumbling, and she was standing in the ruins, and she did not know who to reach for. "I am not going to pretend I care about the kin," Taeho said honestly. "Your people have been a threat to mine for as long as anyone can remember. If I had landed here a month ago, I would have been happy to watch you all destroy each other." Yuna's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. She was listening. Really listening. "But I have been here for 23 days, Taeho continued. "I have seen your people. I have seen children playing in the lower halls. I have seen old kin sitting together, sharing stories. I have seen your healers tending to the sick. And I have seen you, sitting on that throne, carrying the weight of all of them on your shoulders, without asking for help. Not because you are too proud. Because there is no one to ask." He leaned forward. "You did not kill me when you could have. That is the only reason I am alive right now. And where I come from, that means something. Humans do not forget when someone spares their life. We pay that debt. Always." "This is not your war, Taeho," Yuna said. "No, it is not. But I am choosing to make it mine." The word choosing hung in the air between them. Yuna stared at him, and for a moment, her mask cracked. Not much, just enough for Taeho to see what was underneath. Surprise, confusion, and something else. Something warm that she probably had not felt in centuries. "You are one human," she said, "against an army of the most powerful kin on this world. What can you possibly do?" Taeho allowed himself a small smile. It was the first time he had smiled since crashing on this planet. "I can do what humans do best," he said. "I can think like a human. Daesung has spent his whole life fighting kin. He knows how kin think, how they move, how they plan. He has prepared for every kin strategy in existence. But he has never fought a human. He does not know how we think. And that is his weakness." "How do humans think?" Yuna asked. "We cheat," Taeho said simply. "We lie. We trick. We change the rules of the game while the other side is still playing by the old ones. We do not fight fair because we cannot afford to. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest, or the oldest, or the most powerful. But we are still here. And every species that tried to wipe us out is not." Yuna studied him for a long time. The blue light played across her face, softening the sharp lines, making her look almost human for a moment. Then she stood and walked to him. She moved like water, smooth, silent, and unstoppable. She stood close enough that Taeho could feel the cold that came off her skin, the ancient power that hummed beneath it like a sleeping storm. He looked up at her. "If you betray me," she said softly, "I will not be merciful." "If I betray you," Taeho replied, "I will deserve whatever you do." Something passed between them in that moment. It was not love. Not yet. It was something older and simpler. Two broken things recognizing each other in the dark. Two lonely souls who had spent their whole lives building walls, and who had just for the first time left a door open. Yuna extended her hand. It was pale and cold and strong enough to crush stone. Taeho took it. His hand was warm and scarred and rough from years of war. They shook once. The alliance was made. And somewhere in the eastern tunnels, Daesung felt something shift in the balance of power on Noctara. He did not know what it was, but for the first time in a very long time, the Great Lord felt a small, cold seed of doubt settle in his chest. Something he had not planned for. A human was in the game now. They put him in a cell. It was not the worst cell Taeho had ever seen. The walls were smooth black stone, and there was a low bed carved into the wall with a thin blanket on it. A small blue light glowed in the ceiling. No window, no door handle on the inside. The air was cool and dry and smelled faintly of something sweet, like old flowers. He sat on the bed and checked his wounds. The cut on his forehead had stopped bleeding. His right arm was bruised badly, but not broken. 2 of his ribs ached when he breathed deep. He had survived worse, much worse. He closed his eyes and thought about the Queen. He had felt her power the moment he walked into that throne room. It was not like anything he had experienced before. On the battlefield, fear came from explosions and gunfire and the screams of dying men. But her power was different. It was silent. It pressed against his mind like a hand slowly closing around his skull. It whispered things, that he was small, that he was nothing, that he should bow down and accept his end. Most creatures would have broken under that pressure. Their minds would have cracked like thin glass. But Taeho had spent 2 years as a prisoner on Benora, where the temperature dropped to -80 at night, and the guards beat him every morning just to see if he was still alive. He had learned to build a wall inside his mind, a quiet place where nothing could reach him. The Queen's power had hit that wall and found it solid. That was why she had not killed him. He was sure of it. She was curious about the wall. Hours passed, maybe a full day. There was no way to tell time underground. Then the door opened, and 2 kin guards led him out. They walked through long corridors, lit by that same pale blue light. Other kin stopped and stared as he passed. Some looked afraid. Some looked disgusted. A few looked hungry. Taeho kept his eyes forward and his back straight. They brought him to a smaller room. It was beautiful in a cold way. Dark stone walls with silver patterns. A long table, 2 chairs. Yuna was already there. She sat in one chair with perfect stillness. Not the kind of stillness a person has when they are waiting. The kind of stillness a statue has. Like she had not moved in hours, and could go hours more without moving at all. Her red eyes found him the moment he entered. The guards left. The door closed. They were alone. "Sit," Yuna said. Taeho sat across from her. The table between them was empty. He folded his hands on it and waited. "You are Captain Taeho," she said. "Human Federation Navy. 12 years of service. 4 wars. Decorated 7 times. Captured once on Benora. Held for 2 years. Escaped alone." She paused. "We searched your ship's records." "Then you know I was on a recon mission," Taeho said. "I was not coming here to fight you. It does not matter why you came. You are here, on my world. That is enough reason to kill you." "Then why haven't you?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. Her red eyes studied him again, the way they had in the throne room. That deep, reaching look, like she was peeling back the layers of his mind, one by one. "When I look at other creatures," she said slowly, "I see their life force. It glows around them like light around a candle. And when I press against their minds, that light shakes. It flickers. It weakens. This is natural. All living things fear the kin." She leaned forward slightly. But when I pressed against your mind, your light did not flicker. It burned brighter. Taeho said nothing. I have lived for over 3,000 years, Yuna continued. I have met every species in this part of the galaxy. I have brought kings and warlords and generals to their knees, with nothing but my presence. Not one of them has ever stood before me the way you did. Her voice dropped lower. What are you made of, human? The same thing all humans are made of, Taeho said simply. Stubbornness. For a moment, just a moment, something moved across Yuna's face. It was so fast that anyone else would have missed it. But Taeho had spent his whole life reading people, watching for the small things that told the truth, and what he saw on the Vampire Queen's face, just for that one heartbeat, was a smile. Not a cruel smile, not a mocking one, a real one. It disappeared as fast as it came. I should drain you, she said. Your life force is strong, stronger than anything I have tasted in centuries. One feeding, and I would be more powerful than I have been in 1,000 years. But you won't, Taeho said. You sound very sure. And curiosity is worth more to someone who has lived 3,000 years than one meal. Yuna stared at him. The room was completely silent. The pale light cast soft shadows across her face, and Taeho could see the age in her eyes, even though her face looked young. Those red eyes had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had watched stars die. And right now, they were looking at him like he was the most interesting thing they had seen in a very long time. You will stay here, Yuna said finally, not as a prisoner, as a guest. A guest who cannot leave. A guest who is alive. That is more than any human has been on Noctara. Taeho nodded slowly. He understood the deal. She was keeping him because he fascinated her. The moment that fascination ended, so would his life. He had to stay interesting. He had to stay useful. He had played this game before, on Benora, keeping himself alive one day at a time, by being just useful enough not to kill. But something was different this time. On Benora, his captors had been cruel and stupid. Yuna was neither. There was something behind those ancient red eyes, a loneliness so deep it had become part of her, like a scar that had grown into the bone. She was surrounded by thousands of her kind, yet she was alone. Taeho recognized it because he carried the same thing inside himself. 12 years of war had taken everyone he cared about, every friend, every brother in arms. He had survived, but survival without connection was just a slower kind of dying. He did not say any of this, not yet, but he filed it away in that quiet place in his mind, behind the wall. Over the next several days, Yuna called for him often. They sat in that same room and talked. She asked about humans, how they lived, how they fought, how they loved. She asked about Earth, which she had never seen. Taeho told her about blue skies and oceans and the feeling of sunlight on skin. She listened with a stillness that was not cold anymore. It was careful, like someone holding something fragile. He asked her about the kin. She told him they were dying, not from war or disease, but from something slower and sadder. Their life force was fading. Each generation was weaker than the last. The old power that had once made them the most feared species in the galaxy was draining away like water from a cracked glass. In another 1,000 years, there would be nothing left. And no one knows why? Taeho asked. Some believe it is a natural end, Yuna said. All things die eventually, even species. Humans don't believe that, Taeho said. If something is dying, we find a way to save it, or we die trying. Yuna looked at him for a long time. Your kind is very strange, she said quietly. We get that a lot. The kin court did not approve. Taeho could feel their hostility every time he walked through the halls. The nobles whispered. The guards watched him with barely hidden anger. A human walking freely in the queen's halls, sitting at her table, speaking to her as an equal. It was unheard of. It was an insult. One night, a kin noble named Daesung came to his cell. He was tall, even for a kin, with silver eyes that burned with cold fury. He was the commander of the Queen's military, and the most powerful lord on Naktara, after Yuna herself. "Enjoy your time, human," Daesung said through the door. His voice was like a blade wrapped in silk. "The Queen's interest is a fire that burns bright and dies fast. When it dies, I will be the one to drain you. And I will do it slowly." Taeho looked at him calmly. "I have been threatened by things much scarier than you," he said. "They are all dead now." Daesung's silver eyes flashed with rage, but he turned and walked away. Taeho lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. He was playing a dangerous game in a place where he had no power, no allies, and no way out. But he was alive, and somewhere behind the Vampire Queen's ancient red eyes, something was changing. He could feel it. And that was enough. For now, the ship was falling apart. Every alarm screamed at once, red lights flashing across the cockpit like angry stars. Captain Taeho gripped the controls with both hands, his knuckles white, his teeth pressed together so hard they could crack. The engines were dead. The left wing was gone, and the dark planet below was pulling him down fast. "Come on," he whispered to the dying machine, "just a little more." But the ship did not listen. It never did. The crash was brutal. Metal screamed against rock. Fire burst through the hull. Taeho's body slammed forward, and the harness cut deep into his chest. Glass shattered across his face, and for a moment, everything was just noise and heat and pain. Then silence. A long, cold silence that pressed against his ears like deep water. He opened his eyes slowly. Blood dripped from a cut above his left eyebrow. His right arm was numb. The cockpit was crushed inward, and the air smelled like burning fuel and wet dirt. Through the cracked windshield, he could see a sky with no stars, just darkness, thick, heavy, endless darkness. This was Naktara. Every soldier in the Human Federation knew about Naktara. It was the planet no one visited and no one talked about without lowering their voice. It sat at the far edge of the outer reach, wrapped in permanent night. No sun ever touched its surface. No colony had ever survived there, and the reason was simple. The vampire kin lived there. They were not vampires in the old Earth way. They did not turn into bats or fear garlic. They were something far worse. The kin were an ancient alien species, tall and pale, with eyes like polished silver. They fed on life force, the energy that kept living things alive. One touch from a kin elder could drain a grown man in seconds, leaving nothing but a dried husk. They had ruled Naktara for thousands of years, and they did not welcome visitors. His legs were shaking, but they held. He looked around. The ground was black rock, smooth and cold. Strange trees with no leaves stood like bones against the dark sky. There was no wind, no sound, just his own breathing and the faint ticking of the cooling metal behind him. He checked his belt. His sidearm was still there. One energy pistol, half charged, a combat knife, a small medkit. That was all he had. His communications gear was destroyed in the crash. His mission, a simple recon sweep of the outer reach border, was over before it started. Something had hit his ship, a pulse of energy from the planet's surface. They had shot him down on purpose. He started walking. There was no point staying near the wreck. If the kin had shot him down, they already knew where he was. Moving gave him a chance, even a small one. He walked across the black rock, his boots making no sound, his eyes scanning the darkness. His training kept him calm. 12 years in the Federation military. 4 wars. 2 years as a prisoner on the ice world of Banora. He had survived things that would have broken most people. He was not going to die on a rock in the dark. But the kin found him anyway. They came from the shadows like they were part of them. One moment the path ahead was empty. The next, 6 tall figures stood in his way. They wore long, dark armor that seemed to move like liquid. Their skin was the color of moonlight, and their silver eyes glowed faintly in the blackness. They carried no weapons. They did not need them. Taeho stopped. He put his hand on his pistol but did not draw it. He knew it would be useless. One shot might hurt one of them. The other 5 would be on him before he could blink. The tallest kin stepped forward. He looked down at Taeho with a cold expression, like a man looking at an insect on his table. Human. His voice was deep and smooth, like stone sliding over stone. You will come with us. If you resist, you will die here. Taeho looked at him for a long moment. Then he took his hand off his pistol. Lead the way, he said. They took him underground. The surface of Noctara was dead and empty, but below, the kin had built a kingdom. Tunnels of black stone opened into vast halls, lit by pale blue light that came from the walls themselves. The architecture was old and beautiful, carved with patterns that seemed to shift when Taeho looked at them too long. Thousands of kin moved through the halls, soldiers, workers, children with silver eyes that watched him with open curiosity. He was probably the first human most of them had ever seen. They brought him to the throne room. It was enormous. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow. Pillars of dark crystal lined the walls, and the blue light here was brighter, almost white. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, sat the vampire queen. Her name was Yuna. She looked young, but Taeho knew better. The kin lived for thousands of years, and their queens were the oldest of all. Yuna had ruled Noctara for over 3,000 years. Her hair was long and black, falling past her shoulders like dark water. Her skin was pale, almost glowing, and her eyes were not silver like the others. They were deep red, the color of old blood. She wore a simple dark dress with no crown, no jewels. She did not need them. The power that came from her was something Taeho could feel in his chest, a pressure, like standing too close to a fire. She looked at him. He looked back. The room was full of kin, guards, advisors, nobles. All of them watched. All of them expected him to fall to his knees. Every other creature brought before the queen had done so. The pressure of her presence alone was enough to break most minds. Taeho did not kneel. He stood straight, blood still drying on his face, his torn uniform dirty and burned. He met her red eyes and held them. His heart was beating fast, but his face showed nothing. 12 years of war had taught him how to hide fear. Yuna tilted her head slightly. It was a small movement, but in the silent room, it felt like thunder. "A human," she said. Her voice was soft and cold, like snow falling on glass. "Alive on my world, standing in my hall," she paused, "and not kneeling." "I kneel to my commander," Taeho said. His voice was steady. "You are not my commander." A ripple went through the room. Several guards stepped forward, their silver eyes burning with anger. One of them hissed, a low, dangerous sound. But Yuna raised one hand, and the room went still. She studied him. Her red eyes moved over his face, his wounds, his hands. She was reading him, Taeho realized. Not just looking, she was reaching into him with something old and powerful, trying to feel what he was made of. And for the first time, in a very long time, something in those ancient red eyes changed. It was not anger. It was not hunger. It was curiosity. "Interesting," Yuna whispered, and that single word saved his life.